The world is changing fast, and some Asian countries are on the brink of collapse. We're talking about economic meltdowns, governments falling apart, and millions of lives upended. Most people have no idea this is happening right now, but it could trigger a massive global crisis. Today, we're diving into 5 countries closer to disaster than you might imagine, and why it matters to you. We'll break down the chaos debt, political turmoil, civil wars, and the ripple effects that could reach us all. This is urgent, underreported, and absolutely real. Let's get into it. First up, Sri Lanka, a paradise once famed for its lush landscapes, golden beaches, and vibrant culture, now transformed into a cautionary tale of economic collapse and human suffering. The country's economy imploded almost overnight, leaving millions of ordinary people scrambling for basic necessities. Fuel stations ran dry, supermarket shelves emptied, and pharmacies could no longer provide life-saving medicines. Daily life became a relentless struggle for survival. A disastrous government decision to ban chemical fertilizers devastated rice production, the backbone of Sri Lankan agriculture. Fields that once overflowed with grain turned barren, and farmers watched helplessly as their livelihoods vanished, sparking widespread hunger and desperation across rural communities. Billions were borrowed for ambitious infrastructure projects, ports, airports, highways, meant to modernize the nation. But these flashy developments became unpayable debts. And now, many of these grand structures sit eerily empty, symbols of misplaced priorities and financial mismanagement. The government defaulted on its loans, the rupee crashed to historic lows, and inflation soared to record highs. Prices of everyday goods skyrocketed, eroding savings and pushing families deeper into poverty. As frustration boiled over, furious citizens stormed the president's house, forcing leaders to flee in chaos. The nation was left leaderless, its political system in turmoil, and its people desperate for change. Even with a bailout from the IMF, recovery has been painfully slow. Taxes have soared, the once thriving middle class has been decimated, and for many, daily life remains a constant battle just to get by. Corruption, mismanagement, and a mountain of debt still loom large, threatening to plunge Sri Lanka back into crisis at any moment. The trust between the people and their leaders is shattered. The country's turmoil disrupts a key shipping region in the Indian Ocean, sending shockwaves through global trade. Sri Lanka's crisis is a stark warning to other debt-laden nations teetering on the edge. As crime rises and skilled workers flee the country in search of better opportunities, the social fabric is being torn apart. Families are separated, and hope is fading for many. The crisis isn't over. Sri Lanka is still walking a tightrope, balancing on the edge of another disaster. The next fall could be even more devastating if real change doesn't come soon. International aid and loans offer only temporary relief, a band-aid on a deep wound. What Sri Lanka desperately needs are deep structural reforms to rebuild its economy and restore hope. The world should pay close attention. Sri Lanka's collapse could be a preview of what's to come for other nations facing similar debt traps and governance failures. For millions of Sri Lankans, the struggle continues every single day. The future remains uncertain, and the dream of paradise feels more distant than ever. This is what happens when paradise collapses, when mismanagement, corruption, and debt destroy a nation's promise. The lesson is clear. Stability is never guaranteed, no matter how beautiful or prosperous a country may seem. Sri Lanka stands as a stark warning to the world, a reminder that paradise can be lost in the blink of an eye. Next, we turn to Pakistan, a nuclear-armed nation of 240 million people, now teetering dangerously on the edge of collapse. Once seen as a regional powerhouse, Pakistan today faces a perfect storm of crises that threaten not just its own stability, but the security of the entire region and beyond. Years of mounting debt and repeated IMF bailouts have left the country in a financial straitjacket, with little room to maneuver. Each new loan only seems to push the country further into a cycle of dependency as the government struggles to meet the harsh conditions set by international lenders. The government is forced to borrow just to pay off old loans, while inflation and utility prices skyrocket, making daily life unaffordable for millions. The cost of basic goods has soared, and families are forced to make impossible choices just to survive. Political chaos is rampant. Leaders are ousted in rapid succession, protests erupt in the streets, and no one seems able to focus on real solutions. The constant infighting has paralyzed the government, leaving the country adrift at a critical moment. Catastrophic floods in 2022 destroyed homes, crops, and infrastructure, deepening the crisis for millions. Entire communities were washed away, and the recovery has been painfully slow, with many still living in makeshift shelters. Meanwhile, extremist violence is on the rise, stretching the military thin as it tries to maintain order. Attacks have become more frequent, and the threat of terrorism looms large over daily life. The Pakistani rupee has collapsed, foreign reserves are nearly depleted, and the specter of national default looms ever closer. Investors have lost confidence, and the economy teeters on the brink of total collapse. For young people, the future looks bleak. Unemployment is rampant, and hopelessness is driving a mass exodus of talent. The country is experiencing a brain drain as its brightest minds seek opportunities abroad, leaving behind a vacuum of innovation and leadership. The stakes could not be higher. Pakistan's collapse would be a global nightmare. Its nuclear arsenal, regional instability, and a looming humanitarian disaster would send shockwaves far beyond its borders. The world keeps stepping in to bail Pakistan out, but the core problems remain unaddressed. International aid provides only temporary relief, while the underlying issues continue to fester. It's a toxic mix: crippling debt, endless political infighting, rising insecurity, and relentless climate disasters. Each crisis feeds into the next, creating a vicious cycle that seems impossible to break. The country is trapped in this downward spiral, and the future is frighteningly uncertain. Every day, ordinary Pakistanis face new hardships, unsure of what tomorrow will bring. For millions, daily life is a struggle for survival. Food lines grow longer, poverty deepens, and hope becomes a rare commodity. The risk of state failure is real, and the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for Pakistan, but for the world. Pakistan is walking a knife's edge, balancing between survival and collapse, with every misstep threatening disaster. The world is watching, anxious and uncertain, as time runs out for meaningful change. Yet, amid the chaos, there are glimmers of hope, people working tirelessly for reform and international partners seeking solutions. The question remains, can Pakistan pull back from the brink? The answer is far from clear. The next chapter in Pakistan's story is unwritten, and the world holds its breath, waiting to see what comes next. Now Myanmar, a country unraveling in civil war. The 2021 military coup sparked nationwide protests, met with brutal violence. Peaceful resistance turned into armed rebellion. Now, fighting rages across the country. The economy has collapsed. Foreign investors fled, the currency crashed, and inflation is rampant. Banks are paralyzed, and people rely on bartering to survive. Over 2 million have been displaced, and war crimes are widespread. Myanmar is isolated, under sanctions, and ignored by its neighbors. With the formal economy in ruins, illegal drug production and trafficking have exploded. Healthcare and education systems are shattered. An entire generation is losing its future. The military is losing ground, but the conflict is only getting more brutal. Myanmar is becoming a failed state, chaos, suffering, and no end in sight. The world watches, but solutions are elusive. For 54 million people, daily life is defined by fear and uncertainty. The country is disintegrating before our eyes. Myanmar's collapse is a humanitarian tragedy. The path to peace is nowhere in sight. This is a nation at war with itself. Our fourth country is Laos, a quiet crisis with explosive potential. Laos borrowed heavily from China for dams and a high-speed railway, hoping for prosperity. Now, debt is over 120% of GDP, and the projects aren't paying off. The country is running out of foreign currency, the kip has crashed, and inflation is soaring. Fuel shortages and business shutdowns are paralyzing daily life. In desperation, Laos handed China control of its national power grid, a huge loss of sovereignty. The government hides the true debt numbers, scaring off international help. Ordinary people face stagnant incomes and skyrocketing costs. The dream of development has become a nightmare of debt and dependency. If Laos defaults, it could be cut off from global finance and trigger regional shockwaves. The country is trapped between debt, dwindling reserves, and dependence on China. Without major reforms, escape seems impossible. For 7.5 million people, the collapse is real and ongoing. Laos is a warning for other nations chasing rapid development with borrowed money. The world should take note. Finally, we arrive at North Korea, the world's most isolated, secretive, and unpredictable regime. For decades, this enigmatic nation has stood apart, shrouded in mystery and suspicion, its leadership projecting strength while hiding deep vulnerabilities from the outside world. Years of economic mismanagement, combined with relentless international sanctions, have left the country in a state of perpetual crisis. Basic necessities are scarce, and the infrastructure is crumbling, unable to support even the most fundamental needs of its people. Severe food shortages and strict border lockdowns have pushed millions to the very brink of starvation. In rural villages, families survive on meager rations, while the threat of famine looms constantly overhead. The regime's relentless obsession with developing nuclear weapons has drained resources from agriculture and industry, crippling the nation's ability to feed itself or grow economically. Every missile test comes at the expense of empty fields and silent factories. International aid is nearly impossible to deliver, blocked by both the regime's paranoia and global politics. The people are left to suffer in silence, cut off from the world and from hope. Yet cracks are beginning to appear. Smuggled information, foreign movies, news, and even simple USB drives are slowly eroding the regime's iron grip. Even the elite, once untouchable, now feel the pressure of a changing world. If the regime were to suddenly collapse, chaos would erupt. Millions of desperate refugees could flood the borders, triggering a humanitarian disaster of unimaginable scale. The terrifying question of who would control the country's nuclear arsenal would haunt the world. The cost of reunification with South Korea would be astronomical, straining resources and sending shockwaves through the global economy. The social, political, and economic challenges would be unprecedented. North Korea's fragility is a ticking time bomb, hidden in plain sight. The darkness that covers the country at night is a stark reminder of its isolation and vulnerability. The world has little real insight into what's truly happening inside, but the warning signs, defector stories, satellite images, and rare glimpses from within are impossible to ignore. If the regime falls, the consequences would be historic and dangerous. World leaders would scramble to respond, facing a crisis that could reshape the balance of power in Asia and beyond. North Korea is a black box, stable on the surface, but beneath, tensions simmer, and the risk of sudden explosion grows with each passing day. The risk of sudden implosion is real, and the world must not underestimate how quickly the situation could spiral out of control. The world must be prepared for the ultimate wildcard, a crisis that could erupt without warning, changing the course of history overnight. North Korea's collapse would change everything overnight, sending shockwaves far beyond its borders and forcing the world to confront the unimaginable. So there you have it, 5 countries, hundreds of millions at risk, all on the edge. From debt and chaos to war and starvation, these crises could send shockwaves worldwide. The world is interconnected. A collapse in one place can trigger global consequences. Awareness is the first step. These stories matter. We'll keep tracking these crises and bringing you the truth. Stay informed, stay prepared. If this opened your eyes, subscribe and let us know which country surprised you most. Thanks for watching. See you next time.